الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I ask Allah to bless us wherever we are with whatever we are doing, and that He allows us to get closer to Him, and that He helps us to remove our ignorance and makes us better people and overlook our mistakes and make us as a beacon of truth and guidance for those people around us. Ya Rabbal Alameen. We have another book here now which is written by the author and the Shaykh Muhammad ibn al-Uthaymin rahimahullah. And as we are following the theme, and it's good to remind ourselves that every Saturday we are looking at from the works of this great Imam, to the extent that some of the ulama have even said that since he has passed away, the world has not seen a scholar to his pedigree, rahimahullah. Muhammad ibn al-Uthaymin was from the Kibar of ulama. He came from Saudi Arabia in an area known as Unais and Qasim, where he taught for a great deal of time, teaching aqeedah, hadith and fiqh, etc. And he became well known around the world for his uprightness in his aqeedah and his manhaj. And he was a faqih, which is something which is difficult to find, but he was definitely from the major scholars of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. May Allah have mercy on him. So every single Saturday we have plenty of books, and plenty, like we've said, he taught there for a great deal of time, so he's left behind a very lengthy legacy, and it's sufficient for us to go through with what he has gone through, and it will take a very long time for us to cover all of his works. So bi'idhnillah, every single Saturday, once we complete one book, we will take another book from this great Imam. And this is the book that we have today, which is Sifr Salat al-Nabi, the description of the Prophet ﷺ's prayer according to this Alim, Muhammad ibn al-Uthaymin. Now, this is not the only time where he has explained the way that the Muslim should pray according to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. He has a more extensive explanation, and like we've said, because he was teaching over and over again for a large period of time in his masjid, this topic would have come up reoccurringly. So it is not strange for us to say that he has more than one explanation on how to pray the prayer. But this is a book where he actually wrote himself. And the reason why we have chosen this one is because this particular description of the Prophet's prayer is straight to the point, it's concise. In Arabic here, it's 38 pages. And the other ones are a lot more detailed, where he goes through the evidences in detail, he goes through the difference of opinions in details, etc. Sifr Salat al-Nabi is something, and the description of the Prophet's prayer is something that the ulama have talked about for generations. In fact, you'll find companions discussing with one another about what they saw and how they saw the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam pray. So it is the way of the Salaf of this ummah to talk about this topic. And we can see that if a person wants to be upright, as some of the ulama, the Salaf have said, that we can tell the religious commitment of an individual by just looking at his prayer. You can tell. If he is flapping, and then you can see that this person is not serious in his salah. Then you can see how firm he is in his religion. If you find a person who is studying this topic over again, and you can see that he's got concentration and he's praying and he's doing all the aspects correctly, then you know that he has studied this topic. And this is the way of the Salaf of this ummah. They used to reoccurringly teach the Prophet's prayer described, and talk about the hadith which look at how the Prophet ﷺ has been described to pray his salat. So it's not strange that after the passing of the companions, the madhahib and the four madhabs and even the other madhabs which have died out have their own description of the sifar of the prayer of the Prophet ﷺ, the description. So now you will find differences of opinion creeping in, even though they already existed before, but now they are spreading. So we have the four famous madhabs, the Hanafi madhab, the Maliki madhab, the Shafi madhab and the Hanbali madhab, all of them having their own interpretation. And this is a very important point that we need to stop at and to discuss, which is that even within the ulama of Ahl Sunnah today, you will find people saying that this is how you should pray, and another one will say, no, not part of the prayer, you shouldn't be doing that, you should be doing something else. And differences of opinion, even within the realm of what we call the safe sect, Aqidah, who follow the Aqidah of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'at, Salafiyya, etc., all of them, they have their own interpretations. So what is the correct way? How do we understand it? Whenever there is a difference of opinion, and we need to understand this as a principle, whenever there is a difference of opinion, we need to respect that difference of opinion. But what is the difference of opinion which is legitimate and which is not legitimate? Allah says in the Quran, فَإِن تَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ فَرُدُّوهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. If you differ in something, then take it back to Allah and His Messenger. Therefore, if you have a Hanafi scholar who has written a book which is similar to this, the Prophet's prayer described, and he is saying certain things, and he is following the evidences which are strong to him, you have to respect with what he is saying. You can't mock that. You can't say he is wrong. You can't ridicule him. But you can respectfully say, I think there is something else which is for me stronger, or what I have been taught stronger. And that's how we understand this difference of opinion when it comes to the Prophet's prayer described, and this is how we understand any kind of difference of opinion. As long as there is evidence, then we have to respect it. If there is no evidence, then it is rejected. Man amila aman laysa alayhi amruna fahuwa rad. If it's a person does an action which doesn't have any precedence with what the Prophet ﷺ has previously done, and there is no evidence for it, then it is baseless, and it will be rejected. Therefore, the Sifat Salah of the Prophet ﷺ, you will find the different madhabs saying it. You will even find Shaykh Ibn Baz saying one thing, and Shaykh al-Uthaymin saying another thing, and then you'll have Shaykh al-Albani, which is the most famous one, which I'm sure we've all read and been exposed to at some point, saying some things. And now you have other scholars, contemporary scholars, issuing their own difference and their description of the prayer. Why are they doing that when it's already been explained? The reason why is because they are saying, this is what is stronger to me in light of the evidences. And this is what I wish to teach you. However, if you have something else which you think is stronger, you are free to accept that. So it's something which we have to understand before we get into this book. That I'm pretty sure you have looked at the description of the prayer. Every single one of us has been taught how to pray, even the children here in the room. But that doesn't necessarily mean that one is correct or one is incorrect and you can ridicule. No, what it means is for us to then investigate. If you hear something which is new, which you are not familiar with, it is then upon you to investigate and think, okay, well, is that the right one? Let me find out. Let me ask. Let me read. Let me research. Muhammad ibn Salih al-Uthaymin rahimahullah authored this book, Sifat Salah al-Nabi, and he begins, may Allah have mercy on him, with the Khutbah al-Hajah, inna alhamdulillah nahmadu wa nasta'in, with something that we hear all the time, and he begins with that, which is a very important point that we need to address also, which is that you will find some people, when they are talking about religious knowledge, they do not begin with the mentioning of the name of Allah. And that is a mistake. The Prophet ﷺ said that any affair which is of importance doesn't begin with the name of Allah, فَهُوَ يَقْطَعْ, then it is cut off from any kind of benefit. فَهُوَ أَبْتَرْ, in another narration, then it is completely wasteless. Therefore, anything that we wish to do of any kind of significance and getting close to Allah, then it must begin with the name of Allah. Inna alhamdulillah nahmadu wa nasta'inu, etc. The author begins, and he begins with the shahadatain. What is the most important thing? We've just talked about differences of opinion. What is the most important thing, irrespective of what madhab you follow, irrespective of what evidence you think is the strongest? What is the most important thing that we have to preserve in the salat?
Concentration.
Excellent. You will not find any scholar from any generation, from any madhab, except that they are all agreed on one thing, which is that the Muslim must pray according to the way that the Prophet ﷺ prayed. He said, "Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli." Pray as you have seen me pray. Now, often people will look at that and say, well, he raised his hands, and he didn't raise his hands, he put his hands below the navel, he put it above the navel, and all those different things. Those are differences of opinions. Is there any two scholars which will say, no, you don't need to concentrate, you don't need to focus? Why? How did the Prophet ﷺ pray? with utmost concentration and khushu'. And that is the person who is then following the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, irrespective of what he does with his hands and his limbs. That is the most important thing. So the author begins, اعتقد أنك إذا قمت إلى الصلاة فإنما تقوم بين يدي الله. You should believe that when you are standing and you stand up to pray, you are actually now standing up to stand in front of Allah Jalla wa Ala. You are actually standing up in front of Allah Jalla wa Ala, and He is looking over you, and He knows what is inside of you, and He knows where your eyes are turning, He knows where your fingers are and your hands are, He knows what you are reciting, and He also knows what you are whispering to yourself. وَيَعْلَمُ مَا تُوَسْوِسُ بِهِ نَفْسَكَ. وَحِينَئِذٍ, therefore, if you recognize that, and that is part of your iman and your aqidah, you would then preserve your prayer as if you realize that you are standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your concentration is in the salah, your heart is in the salah, your focus is in the salah. Because ultimately the only thing that you want to do out of praying the salah is to get closer to Allah and attain His happiness, and that you leave the masjid and you leave the salah being better. Supplicate for something that you need. Concentrate on something that you could have benefited from. And when you do that, and there is a guarantee in this, in the Quran, that when you concentrate, Allah will guide you to something that you had not even perceived before. أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. Do they not then concentrate and ponder on the Quran, or are their hearts sealed? And Allah says in many different places, concentrate on the Quran, because the Quran is something which is blessed. And so if you're praying the salah and you're standing in front of Allah and you're concentrating, it is very likely that in your salah, whilst you're concentrating and you're supplicating to Allah, that by the end of it you're going to benefit from something that you probably didn't even realize that was there for you. But how do you get that? We have to then engage with the Arabic language. We have to either go out there and learn it, or at least learn as much as you need to increase you in your khushu'. So learn what the Fatiha means, learn what the small surahs means, and learn what the Subhana Rabbil Azeem means, and all the different tasbihats, Subhana Rabbil A'la. Learn what the tahiyyat means. That is then your connection, because you are then saying something which, there is no difference between a person saying the Fatiha and the Durood. There is no difference. He doesn't understand anything. He's just saying it. What's the benefit? The benefit is that he has done something which is obligatory, and Allah will reward that for him. But has he attained focus and concentration to the best of his ability? No. And it is likely that if he is speaking a foreign language, then he'll probably be thinking about something else in his own language. It's possible. The Shaykh begins by saying, and he ends the book also by saying, focus, concentrate, remove all of those things which are distracting you, and remove the wasawis. Because according even to some of the ulama, like he is saying here, وَلَكِنْ الْقَمْ ضَعِفَ هَذَا النَّقْص الْكَبِيرِ, the heart will then become lost with this negligence from himself. حَتَّى إِنَّ بَعْدَ الْعُلَمَاءِ, until to the extent that some of the ulama يقول إِذَا غَلَبَ الْوَسَاوِسِ, if you are concentrating and thinking about something completely separate from the salah, from the beginning to the end, to the extent that you didn't even know what you've said and what you have did, أَلَا أَكْثَرُ الصَّلَاةِ فَإِنَّهَا تُبْتَلْ. If a person does that for most of his salah, the salah is invalidated. And this is not the correct opinion, but like the Shaykh is saying here, وَأَمْرُ الشَّدِيدِ, that this is a very important point that we need to rectify in ourselves. So then the Shaykh goes on in saying that this is how the Muslim should prepare himself. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا قَامَ أَحَدُكُمْ يُصَلِّي فَإِنَّهُ يُنَاجِي رَبَّهُ. If any of you stand to pray, then he is talking and conversing with his Lord. He is actually having a conversation with his Lord. So then the Shaykh goes on to illustrate and talk about that furthermore. Then the beginning of the prayer. For takbir, وَتَقُولُ Allahu Akbar. How do you begin your prayer? So now, in actual fact, when the Shaykh is actually talking about a person removing those wasawis and having the concentration, it is actually talking about the first rukn of the prayer, which is to have the intention and ikhlas. And this is very important. Any action where a person doesn't have an intention or have any kind of sincerity towards Allah and pleasing Him, then the action will not be accepted. وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ حُنَفَاءَ. And then what? وَيُقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ. Then to establish the prayer. Allah doesn't begin by saying that they were commanded, the people of the book, to establish the prayer and to give the zakat without any emphasis on intention and ikhlas, etc. Therefore, any act of worship, and this is a general principle, any act of worship that a person wants to do, then he needs to rectify his intention and to be conscious of the fact that he is doing it to gain Allah's pleasure and to gain His Jannah. So then he begins the prayer by saying Allahu Akbar. And whilst he is saying the takbir, Allahu Akbar, he raises his hands. Now this is a sunnah aspect of the prayer, raising your hands. Even if a person says Allahu Akbar and he puts his hands on his navel or his chest without raising the hands, then there is no harm in that, because entering into the prayer is a pillar where he says Allahu Akbar. But then the Shaykh is saying Sifa, Rafal Yadain. How does a person raise his hands? How do you raise your hands? Like this? With the side of your hands facing the Qibla, the back of your hands facing the Qibla, the front of your hands? Or is it like that, halfway? What is the correct way? Palm of your hands, excellent. So we have quite a few people demonstrating the correct. And this is very important, because a lot of people will say that this is how you should do it, but when it comes to the actual prayer, there's a lot of flapping. And there is not much concentration, again, going back to what the Shaykh was saying in the beginning, on how they are raising their hands. So now, you should raise your hands with your palms facing the Qibla, your fingers outright, with a small bit of a gap in between. And to what extent would you raise your hands now? Is it enough to the chest? Is it far wide like you're doing a press-up? Is it above your head? So now the Shaykh is saying, ترفع يديك إلى حذو المنكبين. So there to the shoulders. Or, that the author is saying here, it's up to you. You can raise it slightly higher towards your ears and there is no harm. Because there are two narrations which say, one narration says he used to touch his earlobes, and another narration which says the shoulders. But what is common with many of the ulama is that the shoulders was the usual habit of the Prophet ﷺ. So towards the shoulders, making it parallel with both shoulders, with his palms facing the Qibla, fingers out wide so that it's not a fist, so that his fingers are not curled, the fingers outstretched with a small gap, so his hands won't be far apart, his fingers won't be far apart, and they won't be clenched either. It'll be a decent amount of natural, how you would face your hands towards someone maybe. ثم تدع يديك يدك اليمنى على يدك اليسرى. Then you will place his right hand over his left hand. And the author is saying here that the correct way of doing it, and like we said, we're going to keep it brief, we're not going to go to the various differences of opinions, but we'll just touch upon it slightly, is that you will place your right, after you've done the takbir, after you've raised your hands, then you will place your right hand over your left hand, with your right hand covering most of your left hand. And this is the opinion of the author here. With your right hand covering most of your left hand. Your right hand would be then placed over your left hand like that. With your right hand placed over your left hand. With your right fingers, the fingers on your right hand, clasping your left hand, gripping it so that your fingers will fall under your left forearm. And that's what the author is saying here. And this is based on the hadith of Sahl ibn Sa'd, which has been mentioned in Sahih al-Bukhari, that the Prophet ﷺ كان الناس يؤمرون أن يدع الرجل يده اليمنى على ذراعه اليسرى في الصلاة. That people were commanded at the time of the Prophet ﷺ that he places, or the Prophet ﷺ used to command them, to place their right hand over their left forearm, whilst they were praying the salat. This is a very important hadith, and we will revisit that later on as to where the person should put his hands after the ruku'. So far, that is what he would do. Where does he place his eyes? And what should he be doing with his head? This is very important, especially for the children, but unfortunately, even for the adults now, unfortunately. And this is a very important point, because even now scientists are saying that the attention span of a human being is being reduced. And like even Ed was saying on Friday, that we are not very conscious with our sensory awareness with things around us. We are too much focused on our tablets, and we are putting a lot of our attention in a short area, circumference area, for a large part of the day. And that is affecting our ability to concentrate and to pay attention, and then also be aware about the things around us. And there are even well-known diseases which are connected to too much screen time, especially for children. So now, if that is what is happening, what's going to happen in the salah? Imagine the imam makes it 10-15 minute salah. Imagine salat tarawih. But they're too accustomed on their phones, flicking and checking their phones. Even adults checking their phones all the time. Concentration will become a very huge issue. But now, the Prophet ﷺ, he used to pray for 2-3 hours on end, easy. And the companions, Uthman radiallahu anh, completed the whole Quran in one night, in one rak'ah. This is well known, this is what the companions were like. How? It's because of their level of concentration, their level of ikhlas, and their level of knowing the Arabic language, something that we have talked about earlier. So this is a way that a person needs to increase in his khushu' and his attention. But the author is saying here, the first thing that he should be doing with his head is خفض الرأس في الصلاة ثم تخفض رأسك فلا ترفعه إلى السماء. Okay, so now basically your head should be down. Don't outstretch it to the ceiling. But at the same time, he mentions also it shouldn't be that your chin is touching your chest, so that your head is, in a very rigid position, too far down. And it shouldn't be too far up. Your head should be, what would we say, maybe about 45 degrees, facing the place where you are going to make sujood. This is because in Sahih Bukhari, naha an rafa' al-basar ila as-sama' fi as-salat. The Prophet ﷺ forbade us to look up during the prayer. And in another narration, some of the ulama have looked at this narration, this is in Bukhari and Muslim, agreed upon by both of them, to say that looking and moving your head around could even then be a major sin. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, what is wrong with people? They raise their eyes and their heads towards the sky. Obviously at that time it was the sky. Towards the ceiling. فِي الصَّلَاةِ أَوْ لَا تَرْجِعْ إِلَيْهِمْ. If they continue doing this, it is possible that their eyesight will not be returned back to them. So they'll be looking around in the prayer, etc. It is possible that Allah could snatch their eyesight from them. Now what this teaches us is that if there is a stern punishment in the Sharia, then that basically means that it could be a major sin, and this is how some of the ulama have interpreted it. But the majority of the ulama have said it is makruh. It's makruh for a person to be looking around. And the reason for this, and we will again revisit this because it's a very important point, Allah says in the Quran, فَوَلِّ وَجْهَكَ شَشْرَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ. Wherever you are, فَحِيثُمَا كُنْتُمْ فَوَلُّوا وَجُهَكُمْ شَطْرَهُ. Wherever you are, if you are praying, make sure that you are facing the Qibla. What does that mean? That means your body, your face, your direction should be towards the Qibla. Therefore, you shouldn't be looking around. However, if the person is facing the Qibla and his eyes are going right and left, or they're going up and down for whatever reason, then that doesn't nullify what is mentioned in the ayah, because he is still then facing the Qibla. Therefore, his head should be at 45 degrees, and his eyesight should be fixated on the place where he is going to make sujood. So now we have the posture. He really hasn't said anything yet. He's just said Allahu Akbar. His right hand is over the left. His head is facing 45 degrees down at the place of sujood. وَيَسْتَفْتِحْ وَيَقُولُ. And then he makes the first dhikr of the salat, where he makes the opening dhikr. And what is common is the hadith in Abu Dawood, and we did this in the series of Hisn Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ used to say, Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, wa tabarak asmuk, wa ta'ala jadduk, wa la ilaha ghayruk. And the more extensive explanation of the Prophet's prayer by al-Uthaymin rahimahullah, he goes into detail as to the meaning of each of these words, and he does that throughout the prayer. And that helps a person understand how to pray, but also helps the person in understanding what he is saying. But we've talked about this before in Hisn Muslim. Also, we looked at the other narration, and there's probably about 5 or 6 different things that the Prophet ﷺ used to say when opening the prayer, as the author is mentioning here. Allahumma ba'i bayni wa bayna khataaya kama ba'ta bayna al-mashriq wal maghrib. And there are different narrations to that. So a person can refer back to Hisn Muslim to gain more about what has been narrated in the Sahih Sunnah about that. The author then also mentions the well-known principle, which is that if the Prophet ﷺ used to do different things, this is a very important principle. If the Prophet ﷺ did one thing on one day in this way, then the second day he went another way and he did it another way. And in the third time, or in other parts of his life, he did it in different ways. How do we understand that? Does that mean that is abrogated, that one, so we don't do that one anymore? This is a very important principle, which is that if all of them are authentic, then we affirm every single one of them and we variate. So sometimes you will do this one, and sometimes you will do that one. And that way the sunnah is not dead. That way the sunnah does not die out. Because if we were to say it's abrogated, that he used to do this in the beginning and he doesn't do that in the end, something that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ used to do would be then completely discarded. And we will say, we're not doing that, because that was old and this is new. Or is it better for us to say, no, we'll do that one and that one. Sometimes we'll do this one, sometimes we'll do that one. And that is a very important point. And you will find many examples of that in fiqh. You'll find that in salah, you'll find that in siyam, you'll find that. Right, so now he's done the opening dua. What's the next thing that he needs to do? Before that, isti'adha. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Then he recites the Fatiha. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Rahmanir rahim. Until the end. And the evidence for that is that Allah says in a hadith Qudsi, Qasamtu salat bayni wa bayna abdi nisfayn. I have split the prayer between me and my servant into 2 halves. So when he says Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Allah says Hamadani Abdi, my servant has praised me. And whilst the person is making the Surah Al-Fatiha, Allah Jalla wa Ala is talking to you back in every part of the Fatiha. And the Prophet ﷺ also said in a separate hadith, there is no salat for the person who does not recite the Fatiha. So the Fatiha is very important. The Fatiha must be recited in every single raka'ah. After the Fatiha, he says Ameen. Is Ameen an ayah from the Quran? No. So then why do we say it? It's a dua, or it's a sealing of the dua, which means, oh Allah, answer our prayer. And there's plenty of evidences from the Quran, from the Sunnah and the actions of the companions that they used to say Ameen after the Fatiha in the loud prayers, but the Prophet ﷺ himself doing it also. So after he has done the Fatiha, even though the Ameen is not part of the Fatiha itself, he would then say Ameen. Then he recites a surah. Now reciting a surah with the agreement with all of the ulama is a sunnah aspect of the prayer. So if a person doesn't have time, he's on a lunch break, the time for prayer is going to finish, the ulama agree that if a person leaves out reciting the surah, then he has not invalidated his prayer and he's done something which he shouldn't do. And if a person continues in that way, then possibly he could end up being sinful, especially if he is negligent. But at this stage, it's important for us to know that he would then recite a surah, but it's not one of those obligatory parts, it's not a pillar of the prayer. The author goes on to say that the Maghrib should be short and the Fajr should be long. As for the remaining salawat, then it is up to him. Dhuhr, however he wants, Asr, however he wants, but Maghrib should be short, and Isha is however he wants, but the Maghrib should be short and the Fajr should be long, as much as it can. And this is a problem, especially now when we are sometimes in certain masajid praying Fajr very late, and it's become very habitual and consistent that the Imam prays just one side or 1.5 sides. When it's been narrated that, for example, Umar Khattab, in Salatul Fajr, and one day he recited Surah Yusuf in 1 rak'ah and Surah Nahl in the 2nd rak'ah. Yusuf and Nahl, 2 rak'ahs. How long must that have been? It is unfortunate that we are becoming accustomed, like we've said, about the issue about concentration. Then he goes into ruku', but before he goes into ruku', what does he do? He raises his hands. How do you raise your hands? Is it like before? Or you just flap it? Back how it was. And this is very important, because the companions, Ibn Umar and others, said that he would raise his hands like he did in the beginning. So if a person is doing it correctly in the first one, he's conscious in the first one, when he's beginning the prayer, and in the second one he's doing however he wants, then he is not following the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Granted that this is a sunnah part of the prayer, and if a person omits it, then there is no harm in that. However, it is something that a person needs to take seriously. And the companions used to take it seriously. Imam Bukhari has a book about raising the hands in prayer. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu said that for every single finger you will get a reward. And he also said, if I had no hand, I would raise my arm. If I didn't have an arm, I'd raise my shoulder. This is the extent that Abu Hurairah wanted to emphasize that raising the hands is a sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ at this point, and it's been narrated from the Khulafa al-Rashidun, all four of them, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman and Ali. And there are over 40 to 50 companions who have narrated, and it is mutawatir with the ulama, that they used to raise their hands before and after the ruku'. Mutawatir means there is such a large number of the companions that have narrated this on to another large number of tabi'een, who were the students of the companions, who then narrated it on again to another generation. Such a large number. And in actual fact, the size of the number would probably even grow in certain chains until it was recorded in one of the books, Bukhari, Muslim, or this is known as mutawatir. So when we have like the ulama Ibn Hajar and others from the ulama have said that raising the hands before and after the ruku' is mutawatir, this is basically the meaning, that we have a large number of the companions, 40 to 50, who then narrated to a large number of those students of the companions, and until it was recorded in one of the books, then this is definitely an affirmed sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ with the utmost highest level of authenticity. Sahal.
So why is it the Hanafis neglect this part of the salah?
Okay, neglect again is a very harsh word, because the questioner is asking, why is it that the Hanafis are neglecting? Now this goes back to the introduction, which is very important. We can't, I'm not saying that you're doing this, but we have to be very careful with the wording. We can't mock, we can't insult, we can't abuse, and we can't ridicule people's opinions. The Hanafis came to their opinion because their madhab, Abu Hanifa, learned from a man called Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman, who then learned from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was of the opinion that you don't raise your hands. Now there's a difference of opinion as to why. Some of the ulama have said that he didn't raise his hands because it's a sunnah aspect. If it's a sunnah aspect, you don't need to. And I've actually seen ulama myself in Saudi Arabia, sometimes they don't raise their hands. They go into ruku' without raising their hands. Why? Because it's a sunnah aspect. If a person does it, he will be rewarded. If he leaves it, then he won't be punished. It's not something like we've just said about the surah and about raising the hands. Those sunnah aspects of the prayer should be preserved on a habitual basis. But if a person leaves it out, there's no harm in that every now and then. So one interpretation, Ibn Mas'ud didn't used to do that because he saw it as a sunnah aspect. But there's another point which is very important. This is in fiqh now, and this will come again when we look at the tashahhud, that Ibn Mas'ud was one of the very earliest of the companions. And a lot of things changed afterwards. Therefore, he held rulings and opinions which were earlier on. I'll give you another example. Where do you place your hands in the ruku'? On the knees. In the beginning, they used to place them in between the knees. They used to rigid them in between the knees, and this is how Ibn Mas'ud used to make ruku'. But obviously that changed later on. Prophet put it on the knees, you know, grabbing his kneecaps, as we will see. But now, if a person holds that opinion, then he needs to investigate further. Is this the opinion of Mas'ud? Is there something which is stronger? Are there more companions on the other side? Is the evidence more compelling on the other side? And then that's how I'll base my judgment. But once I've based my judgment, I cannot ridicule that. So they have a companion on that side. So it's very important. Therefore, neglect is... So this is why they don't raise their hands, because Ibn Mas'ud only raised it for Takbiratul Ihram. That is their opinion. However, we have more evidence on the other side, and this is what we will respectfully follow. Now, this is a very important point, which I wanted to touch on a point at some point. And we'll look at this again when we're looking at where do you place your feet. But if you are in a masjid, if you are amongst the community, raising your hands and pointing your feet to feet is going to agitate them and annoy them and harm them, then you will find fatwa from all of the madhahib, where they will say, do as the people are doing. Don't annoy the people. Don't harm the people. Because you have to remember, when you go to a different mosque, they don't know about these things. This is probably, they've never heard any hadith which says you should be raising your hands or you put foot to foot. They've probably never had that, ever. So when you come along, who is this guy trying to put his foot next to my foot? You are interrupting his khushu'. You are perhaps, making it more difficult for him because he's not used to standing in that manner. And it could even then create a fitna. I even know one sheikh from Afghanistan, and he said, if you raise your finger longer than ashhadu in the Hanafi madhab, as we will see later on, longer than it should be, you could even have your finger broken. Because they were saying, what is this person doing? He has left the sunnah and he's following a different madhab, he's deviated. Because they don't understand. This is the level of their intelligence. So you have to then go into their mosque and respect their difference of opinion. If they are knowledgeable, and if they're just normal people, then you don't want to disrupt that. But if you can pray and nobody will harm, such as you in a musalla, in a workplace or something like that, then you can do it. But a person needs to be conscious of that. So now, you raise your hands how you did before. We're going into ruku', just to go back to where we were. You raise your hands, we're going into ruku'. So you raise your hands as you would do with your palms facing the qibla, your fingers stretched out with a gap in between. And then he puts his head down into ruku'. How does he make the ruku'? So now you would raise your hands as you were going down. You don't raise your hands, then put them down, and then go into ruku'. It's very important. You would raise your hands 4 times in the salah. This is the second one. We'll look at the other 2 afterwards. Every single time that you raise your hands, you're doing it simultaneously whilst you're moving. So when you're doing Takbiratul Ihram, when do you do it? Do you raise your hands and then say Allahu Akbar? Or do you say Allahu Akbar and then raise it? Do you raise your hands and then say Allahu Akbar? How would you do it? You do it whilst you're saying Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. When you're going into ruku', Allahu Akbar. You get that? So then how do we make ruku'? So now we are in ruku', and you will say Subhana Rabbil Azim 3 times. It's been narrated by Abu Dawud and others from the ulama. Some of the ulama have said 3 is the minimum, where the correct opinion with the majority is once is the minimum. Subhana Rabbil Azim. Now your back should be straight, as the hadith of Aisha. Kan Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam idha raqa'a, when he used to make ruku', his head never used to be up tilting, and his head never used to be down too much. His head and his back used to be straight. His head and his back used to be straight. And now this is very important, because now you have to make sure that your shoulders are out. If your shoulders are too in, then your back's not going to be straight. Your back's going to be curved. And it could even, depending on your posture, it could also even then be that your head is tilting, and there's a problem with that. Now that doesn't nullify your salat. As long as you are in that position and you have rested your body, even if your ruku' is bent, your back is bent, then the ruku' is correct. However, you have done something which is not according to the sunnah. Yes, Imam. Have you got a question? I thought you had your hand up. You're just stretching. Yeah.
If Jama'ah is in ruku',
yes,
and I come during the ruku',
yeah,
and starting with him, shall I repeat this rak'ah?
Okay, so now this is a very important question, which the book doesn't talk about, because there are ahkam when it comes to salah which is connected to congregational prayer. But here we're just talking about how to pray. The question is asking, if the Imam is in ruku' and I've walked into the congregation and I make ruku' with the Imam, as long as the Imam is in ruku' and he's not begun to move, then you have caught the prayer. You have caught the rak'ah and you don't need to repeat that rak'ah. Because the Prophet ﷺ said in Sahih Muslim, إِذَا أَدْرَكُمُ الرُّكُوءَ أَدْرَكْتُمُ الرَّكَعَ. If you come to the prayer and you meet the ruku', then you have met that rak'ah. And that is the correct opinion. There is another opinion, and that is the opinion of the majority. There's a small minority of the scholars, Abu Hurairah, Bukhari, others have said that he needs to repeat that rak'ah. But the correct opinion, in light of what the Prophet ﷺ said in that hadith, Sahih Muslim, is that he has met that rak'ah. Then he says, Subhana Rabbil Azim 3 times, and then he gets up from the ruku' after his back is straight and he is relaxed. You have to remember, relaxing and making sure that your body is stable in each posture is a very important point. So now if you've got into ruku' and you've just come back up and your body hasn't rested in any part of the prayer, then that salah is invalidated. And that's the opinion of the majority. So you have to make sure that you have settled in ruku', Subhana Rabbil Azim 3 times, and then get up, Sami Allahu liman hamida. Whilst he is saying Sami Allahu liman hamida, he raises his hands simultaneously. So you don't stand up, say Sami Allahu liman hamida, then raise your hands. You are saying it whilst you stand up. Now again, your back has to be upright. So if you're back, you come up and then you've gone up and you've not rested standing up, and then you've gone down again for sujood, then that aspect of the salah is invalidated, and because it's one of the pillars, the whole salah is invalidated. Then the author mentions, after saying Sami Allahu liman hamida, he can then say Rabbana lakal hamd. And there are 4 ways of saying Rabbana lakal hamd. And again, going back to the principle that we mentioned before, the Shaykh reiterates here, there are 4 ways. You can say Rabbana lakal hamd. You can say Rabbana wa lakal hamd. You can say Allahumma Rabbana lakal hamd. Or you can say Allahumma Rabbana wa lakal hamd. And all of them have been narrated, and we've talked about that also in our Hisnul Muslim class. And we've also looked at some of the adhkar that a person can say in ruku', as the author is mentioning again in the Hisnul Muslim class. After he has come up from ruku', what does he do with his hands? Now the majority of the ulama say he has to put it down by his side.
Some people, they put their hands.
And then some people put their hands back where they were. The majority of the ulama say no, you put them back by them sides, by his sides, because the Prophet ﷺ has been narrated from some of the companions that he would then make his joints go back to how they were. His joints would go back to how they were. How is the joints? According to this interpretation, that's how your joints are. Like that. But let's remind ourselves from the hadith of Salih bin Sa'd. What did he say? كان الناس يأمرون أن يدع الرجل يده اليمنى على ذراع يسرى في الصلاة. The companions used to be commanded to place their right over their left in what? In salat. Therefore, as long as you are in salat and as long as you are standing, the right has to be over the left. And how do we understand that he put his hands back how they were? How they were. You were standing in front of your Lord. Don't stand in maybe even a confrontational manner, in a relaxed manner. You stand in a manner of submission. Now this is the opinion of the Shafi'is, but the majority of the ulama have said no, it goes back down. So again, it's a person, up to him, has to look at what he thinks is stronger. But according to the author, his hands would go back with right over the left. You got a question? Yes?
If you're in salah, you place your hands like this. Is it wrong?
Okay, so now he has placed his right palm over the left hand. Not the left wrist, not the left forearm, the left hand. Now, based on this hadith of Salih bin Sa'd, it's a very good question at a very good time, because we just mentioned this hadith. أن يدع الرجل يده اليمنى على ذراعه اليسرى. And there's another narration where the Prophet ﷺ said that all of the Anbiya have been commanded with 2 things. To place the right over the left, and to hasten the iftar when they are fasting. Every single Nabi. Therefore, based on the second narration, as long as your right is over the left, then there is no harm. So even if your right is placed over the left, that is fine. If your right is placed over the left wrist, that is fine. If your right is gripping your left wrist, that is also fine. If your right is over the left forearm, not gripping, just placed over the, that is fine. If your right is gripping the left, all of that is fine. Why? It's because there is nothing conclusive to say that this is what a person should do. However, the author has gone with the left forearm being preferable. The reason why is because of the authenticity in Bukhari. And the companion is saying that this is what all of the companions were commanded with. So this is his interpretation. But you will find that this is one of those issues where the ulama have said all of it is relaxed, inshallah. Okay, so now he has stood up from the ruku'. After the ruku' he says, Rabbana lakal hamd. Then he goes in, and then there's another azkar, and the author goes into them. Again, you will find them in Hisn Muslim. Then he goes in to sajda. However, there's a point that we have to mention here, we should probably find in Shaykh al-Albani's book, that sometimes, and this is the opinion of the Shafi'is, again, we have to mention this because it is respected, there is dalil for it, there is ijtihad, that sometimes you would raise your hands before going into sajda again. So now let's recap. In the beginning, you raise your hands. Before the ruku', you raise your hands. After the ruku', you raise your hands. So now you're saying with your hand, with your right over the left, or your hands by your side, Rabbana lakal hamd, hamdan kathiran tayyiban mubarakan fi, etc. And then you would raise your hands again, and then go into sujood. That is the opinion of the Shafis. But the majority of the ulama have said that that narration is weak. Therefore we will not accept that hadith. At best, the hadith is shadh, which basically means it's an anomaly which doesn't go consistently with the rest of the hadith, which have talked about only 4 places of raising your hands. But the Shafi'is have said that you should do it sometimes, and this is the opinion of Shaykh al-Albani. Again, this is something where we would have difference of opinion, where we would respect. But just to recap, you raise your hands, 4 points. Beginning, before the ruku', after ruku', and after the first tashahhud, which is yet to come. Yes?
When it comes to placing the right over the left,
Yes.
is there what do the scholars say about where to place it on the chest?
Excellent. Okay, we haven't discussed that. Where do you place your hands right over the left? Now you will find the Hanafi saying below the navel because of the hadith of Ali. You will find the Hanbalis and some of them saying below the navel also because of that hadith. But the majority of ulama have said that below the navel is weak. The narration of below the navel is weak. And there is a hadith which has been made sahih by many of the ulama, from Ibn Khuzaymah and Ahmad and others, is that it would be on the chest or near the chest. Now you will find in many books that have been translated into English that the hadith in Arabic says ala sadrih, on his chest. Some of the narrations or the translations have said above his chest. So you will find some people putting their hand below their beard or on their neck or above their chest, because the hadith says above the chest, which basically means that you need to go really high. But that is all incorrect. There is no faqih, to my understanding, who will say that you put your hand that high. Either below the navel or on the navel, but the correct opinion is that it will be above the navel, below the chest. So basically what's the diaphragm area? Rib cage below diaphragm. That's the most. How do we understand that? We have something which is implicitly applied from this hadith from Salih bin Sa'd, which is in Sahih Bukhari. Can you put your right hand, because Bukhari is saying this hadith from Salih bin Sa'd that the Prophet ﷺ used to command the companions to put their right over their left forearm. Can you put your right over your left forearm and then be below the navel? Is it possible? Whilst being upright, it's not possible. Unless if your left hand is dangling, it's not possible. You could try it when you get home. So the right has to be over the left in a place where it is natural for you to put it over your forearm and still be standing upright. So where would that be? Round about here. Below the chest, above your stomach. That's where. So irrespective of where you're putting your hand over the left, whether it's over the left hand, over the left wrist, over the left forearm, that is the correct place, and that is the opinion of the Malikis and the Shafis, and that's what the hadith seems to imply to be the strongest. So now he has come up from ruku' and he has placed his hands back over the over his right over the left again. He says, Sami'an Alim Hamida, Rabbana lakal hamd, hamda kathir, etc. Then he's going down into sujood. Like we've said, some of the ulama have said you raise your hands again. The author is saying, Adam raf al-yadayn inda talbiyat lis-sujood. He doesn't raise his hands when he's going down again. The reason why, Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma narrated, وَكَانَ لَا يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ فِي السُّجُودِ. He never used to raise his hands, anything connected to the sujood, while he's going down or whilst he's still sitting. He never used to raise his hand in that posture. Therefore, you wouldn't raise your hands again before going into the sajda. How do you go down? Do you go down with your hands or do you go down with your knees? The author is saying here, وَيَخِرُّ عَلَى رُكْبَتَيْنِ لَا عَلَى يَدَيْهِ. He goes down with his knees first, not with his hands first. And this is the opinion of the majority of the ulama. The majority of the ulama have said you go down with your knees first, not your hands. However, if a person needs to go, this is an issue, just like where do you place your hands? Is it over the forearm? Is it over the wrist? This is an issue where the ulama are lenient on. They're lenient. If you need to put it over your forearm, they're saying that you've done something wrong. No. So if you need to go with your hands first, maybe you've got knee problems or something, then no. But the way that a person should do it is on the knees. And there are two reasons for that. There's the hadith of Wa'il ibn Hujr that the Prophet ﷺ used to go down on his knees. And there's also a narration which has been made sahih by many of the ulama in Bayhaqi that Umar radiallahu anhu used to go down on his knees. So what's the counter argument? The counter argument is found in Sahih Bukhari. Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma used to go down with his hands. Let's go back to what we said about Ibn Mas'ud. Is this an opinion of Ibn Umar? Or is it something that can be elevated to be an action of the Prophet ﷺ? The majority of them have said, no, that is Ibn Umar, how he used to do it, how he perhaps saw the Prophet ﷺ do it once or twice. But the habitual habit of the Prophet ﷺ, knees. Ibn Umar's own father, knees. But now the author brings a hadith, which is a very important hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا سَجْدَ أَحَدُكُمْ فَلَا يُبْرِكْ كَمَا يُبْرِكُ الْبَعِيرِ. If anybody is going down in sajda, then don't go down like a camel goes down. How does the camel go down? According to the opinion who says hands first, the camel goes down with his knees. But according to the majority, now the author is saying here, and he quotes Ibn al-Qayyim, etc., that you go down with your knees, and this is hadith to show that you go down with your knees. Why? How does a camel go down? Does anybody know how a camel goes down? So a camel is standing. It goes down with the front first, and then it sits on its backside. It goes down with the front first. So this is actually a hadith. One hadith, it could be understood in two ways. So that group of scholars say, no, don't go down with your knees. Go down with your hands. Because the camel goes down with his knees, like that. So don't do that. But the majority of the ulama have said, no, he's going down with the front first, and that's what the Prophet ﷺ is telling us not to do. And there is more discussion on this. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah has another hadith which he talks about, and there's another hadith that has been used that the Prophet ﷺ used to go down in his hands first. Ibn al-Qayyim said that hadith is weak, and there is a type of hadith which is weak, which is known as munqalib hadith, which is munqalib, which is basically that the wording is not consistent with other narrators. He's not gone with the same order that other narrators have gone with. We don't want to get in a discussion with this right now, but many of the ulama have said that you go with the knees first, and some of the ulama have said that hands first is a weaker opinion. Then the person is in sujood, and it is absolutely essential that the person makes sajda on 7 limbs, because the Prophet ﷺ has said, "Umirna an nasjud ala sab'ati a'zam." We have been commanded to make sujood on 7 bones: his forehead, his nose, 2, his 2 hands, 1, his 2 hands, 3, his 2 knees, 5, and his 2 feet, wa atraf qadamain, 7. If any part of that has been lifted, and remember, we've said this before, every single part of your salah has to have you stable in that position. So you have to have 7 on the ground, Subhana Rabbil A'la at least once, then your sujood has been completed. But imagine you got an itch on your foot, or something is annoying on your foot, or you have to move your hand or something like that, and you said Subhana Rabbil A'la, Subhana Rabbil A'la, Subhana, and your hand has not really touched the ground, it's not settled, and you've gone up again, invalid. So this is very important. You have to make sure that all 7 are on the ground. The author then makes a very important point that your elbows should be apart and away from your body. It shouldn't be on the floor. And that his body is not curled up. And at the same time, his sajda, so now he's describing the sajda, 7 bones, 7 bones. His elbows are away from his body. He is not curled up, but also at the same time, he is not far and stretching out. The Prophet ﷺ said, "I'tadilu fi sujood." Be balanced, be measured in your sujood. You say then, Subhana Rabbi al-A'la, thalatha marrat. This has been narrated by Ahmad, Abu Dawud, Ibn Majah, and others from the ulama. And there are different narrations, like we've said, during the ruku' and after the ruku', in sujood. And after the sujood, there are many things that we can extend our salat in. But again, this is very unfortunate. We become very relaxed. It's Subhana Rabbi al-A'la, Subhana Rabbi al-A'la, Subhana Rabbi al-A'la. Gone. But this is your chance to make dua. This is your chance to say, who can't memorize Rabbik Filli? Who can't memorize Allahumma arhamni? Who can't say Allahumma atina fid dunya? That's not an ayah from the Quran. The Prophet ﷺ used to say Allahumma atina, not Rabbana atina. He used to change it, and he used to say Allahumma. Who doesn't know that? Extend the sujood, and there are different things that can help you memorize the different adhkar, and you will find them again in Hisnul Muslim. And the author then makes a very important point here, is that the sajda and the ruku' is not a place for a person to be reciting the Quran. Nuhitu an aqra al-Quran raqi'an or sajida. And this is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. He says that I have been prohibited from reciting the Quran in ruku' and in sujood. So what do you do in ruku'? What is the point of the ruku'? The Prophet ﷺ said, فَأَمَّا الرُّكُوء. As for the ruku', فَأَذِّمُوا فِيهِ الرَّبِّ. Whilst you're in ruku', praise your Lord. Increase in praising your Lord. And if a person is having problems memorizing Arabic, until he has got it, he can even say it in his own language. Oh Allah, I praise you. Oh Allah, how amazing are you? Oh Allah, how many things you have given to me. Oh Allah, I can't thank you enough. Praise Him. وَأَمَّا السُّجُودُ فَأَكْثَرُوا فِيهِ مِنَ الدُّعَاءِ. As for the sujood, increase in dua. The function of the ruku' is to praise your Lord. The function of the sajda, and you will not find this, as we've seen in the previous book, Islam is perfect. You will not find these acts of worship in any other religion. Sajda, ask. And again, if you can do it in Arabic, do it in Arabic. If you can't, do it in your own language. Allah's Messenger ﷺ said, أَقْرَبْ مَا يَكُونُ الْأَبْدُ مِنْ رَبِّهِ وَهُوَ سَاجِدٌ. The closest that a person is to his Lord is whilst he is in sujood. So why would a person just say Subhana Rabbil A'la 3 times when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is listening, you're conversing with Him, and He's ready to answer, but you've just turned away without asking for anything? Does that make sense? You go see your friend, he says, come see me, I'll give you a blank check. So you knock on his door, you open the door, say, Assalamu alaikum, I'm going now. You don't ask him for anything. He says he's waiting there with a blank check, you don't ask him for anything. What's the point? Ask. Learn something, ask. Memorize something, ask. And if you can't, and if it's difficult, do it in your own language, and there's no harm in this, is the opinion of the majority of them, including the Hanafis. Then he gets up from the sajda, and he sits between the 2 sajdas. And he sits in a position which is known as muftarish. And muftarish, or iftirash, is where a person sits on his left foot, his buttocks on his left foot, whilst his right is upright to the best of his ability. And if he can, then he will turn his toes towards the Qibla. That's if he can do that. If he can't, then he can at least put the right up and the left. And if he can't do that, then he can sit in any way which is easy for him. Again, this is one of those which are the sunnah aspects of the prayer. He puts his right hand over his right thigh and the left hand over his left thigh. However, the author has got something here, and this is an opinion of Ibn al-Qayyim as well, and some of the Hanbalis, which is that he would then point and make dua between the 2 sajdas. When do we normally point? In the last tashahhud. But the author has got an understanding from these ahadith is that whenever you are sitting, that's what you should be doing. So now you can see, you will probably not find that before, you've probably not heard of that before. Now this is why Sifat Salah is very important, because each madhab, even alim within the madhab, would have his own interpretation. Whilst he is sitting, he says, Rabbik firli. There are different things that a person can say, and we've seen that also in Hisn Muslim, Rabbik firli warhamni wahdini wajburni wa'afni warzuqni, and we've looked at the explanation of that also. But just to mention the correct opinion in this is Ibn Hajar, and this is what I think is the correct opinion, and this is the opinion of the majority, is that he would leave his right hand flat over his right and his right hand flat over his right thigh and the left hand flat over the left thigh without raising the finger. And Ibn Hajar actually addresses this point of raising the finger in between the sujoos. He says that is done at the end. And the narrations that perhaps the Shaykh is using are referring to the tashahhud and not in between. Allah knows best. This seems to be the correct opinion. Then he goes into Sajda again, and he stands up, and his salah is finished. And he continues doing that throughout all of the salawat. Before we just take that question, the Shaykh is asking now, before we get up from the Sajda, do we sit? You'll probably find some people sitting, as they would do between the two Sajdas, and then pushing themselves up, and then get up again. This is the opinion of the Shafi'is. And they've said that it is mustahab, not wajib, mustahab for a person to do that, and this is the opinion of Shaykh al-Albani. However, some of the ulama, the majority of the ulama, have said that it is permissible for a person to do it. It's not one of the actions of the prayer. And the reason why they say that is because every single action of the prayer, is there a part of the prayer that you're not doing anything, you're not reciting anything? Is there any part of the prayer where you're not reciting anything? There's not one part of the prayer that you are not reciting anything. So when a person if he needs to sit, because of old age, injury, whatever, then it is permissible for them to do that. And the dalil for that, the evidence for that, is because the Prophet ﷺ didn't do that intentionally. Had he done that intentionally, he would have done some kind of dhikr and then got up, had it been actually part of the prayer. This is the opinion of the majority. Some of the ulama have said that it's not allowed at all. And it's the opinion of the Hanafi, it's not allowed at all. But the author is saying here that there are three possible views. Number one, that it is allowed if he needs to do so, and this, for the majority, is the correct opinion. Others have said that you should always do it, and the Shaykh is saying, وَلَيْسَ بِبَعِيدٍ. This opinion is a sensible opinion. The Prophet ﷺ, as long as he's done it once, then you can do it. And the Shaykh is saying here, and he's being very impartial in this, and this shows you hikmah. You have one group of scholars saying one thing, another group of scholars saying one another thing. Both of them are very strong evidence. I think this is the strongest one, but if a person wants to do that, there is no harm. This shows you that the saved sect and the correct way of understanding Islam is not a harsh one. It's not a partisanship-based religion. It's not like whether you don't accept the way I'm doing it, I'm not going to give you dirty looks, or you're not welcome in my masjid, or you will become a deviant. This is not the correct way. And this shows you a lack of ilm and a lack of understanding of what the broader understanding of what Islam is, the religion of compassion and mercy and cooperation and unity, and some of the things that we mentioned in the previous book that we looked at. So the Shaykh is saying here, if a person wants to do that, is also fine. But if a person says it's not allowed at all, then that is problematic, because the Prophet ﷺ did it. Therefore, the correct opinion in this now is that a person is permissible for him to do it if he needs to do it. Otherwise, he would get up. How would he get up? So he gets up, and the majority of the ulama have said that he would sit on his heels, and when he would use his right hand, preferably, perhaps even his left hand, this has been narrated by Abu Hurairah, to support himself and then push himself up. Does that make sense? So now you're in sajda, you can imagine yourself in sajda, and you're getting up in one motion. You're not going to sit and get up. You're getting yourself up in one motion. So now you are pushing yourself up, you would sit on your heels slightly so you gain some kind of a balance, and this is what the Prophet ﷺ used to do, and this is the hadith of Wa'il bin Hujr. Support yourself on the earth, and this is the hadith of Abu Hurairah, and then get up, and push yourself up until you are standing, and then you will start reciting again. Do you raise your hands for every single rak'ah? Again, you will find the Shafi'i saying something. Okay.
On the third one.
So now, some of the Shafi'is have said that you would raise your hand for every single rak'ah, and I think Shaykh al-Albani has something which is similar to that, but the majority of the ulama have said no, there is no sound evidence to say. So now you would raise your hands 4 times in the salah, and this is found in Sahih Bukhari, and this is on authority of Ibn Umar, to the extent that Imam Ahmad, who was Imam Ahmad to Bukhari? His teacher. Can you imagine? This is the level of Imam Ahmad. He was on the level of saying, well, Bukhari got that wrong. None of us can do that. It's absolutely unacceptable. However, Imam Ahmad, from his opinion, he said that the 4th one was the opinion of Ibn Umar. So you will find some of the ulama, and you might not find this in some of the descriptions of the prayer, after the first tashahhud, you would raise your hands, and this is the correct opinion. And this is what the author is saying also. So there are 4 times where you raise your hands. Takbiratul Ihram, when you start the prayer. Before the ruku', after the ruku', how would you do in the beginning? And after the first tashahhud. Some of the ulama say you don't do it after the first tashahhud. Again, there is lenience. Now there is also another important point here, is if a person comes late to the prayer, and he needs to stand up and make up a rak'ah perhaps. Say he's in Salatul Fajr, and he needs to make 1 rak'ah. Does he raise his hands after the tashahhud? Why not? It's only for the first tashahhud. So if you've had a tashahhud, you have to think to yourself, is this my first tashahhud? Otherwise you're doing something which has no evidence. That makes sense? Then the person would sit in the tashahhud, he would sit as he would do when he was sitting between the 2 sajdas, resting on his left with his right upright. If he can point his toes towards the qibla and then curl his right foot so that his right foot is upright and he's sitting on his left, that is all good. If he can't do any of those things, he can try to do as much as he can. If he can't do any of those things, then he can sit in a manner which he can do to the best of his ability. Then he does the tashahhud, which is at-tahiyyat. The tashahhud means the tahiyyat position. At-tahiyyatu lillah wa salawatu tayyibat, assalamu alayk. And we've looked at the meaning of this dhikr in Sifr Salah. What does he do with his finger? Now even Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah said that there's nothing conclusive, but he says that he moves his finger up and down at a steady speed, a steady pace, consistently. That's the opinion of the Malikis. Imam Ahmad said, rahimahullah, there is nothing that you would do in the salah where you'll be doing like that. And perhaps a person will get tired, especially if he's sitting at length, then what happens to the frequency between each beating of the finger? So Imam Ahmad rejected that. So some of the ulama have said you would raise your finger at Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah in the tahiyyat, and then you put it back down again. This is the opinion of the Hanafis. The Hanafis also have said, and this is the opinion of the Shafis also, that you would raise your hand at tahiyyat, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, until the end you would leave it pointing. You'll find the Hanafis in the madhab also saying that, and the Shafis saying that also. The Malikis that we just said, beating throughout. And the Hanbalis have said that there is leeway in this also, but like the author is saying here, rahimahullah, that you would raise your finger with every single dua. Now this is problematic for some of us because we don't understand Arabic, and you don't know which part the dua is. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabi wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That's a dua. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad innaka Hamidum Majid. That's a dua, but some of us we don't know that. So now a person can move, he can point, he can move it with any dua. And again, we're talking about leeway, and the person himself then would need to look at what he thinks is strongest for him. The last mas'ala now that the Shaykh is talking about is in the final tashahhud. What's the tashahhud? At-tahiyyat position. In the final tashahhud, if it is a tashahhud, the final tashahhud, of a 3 rak'ah prayer or a 4 rak'ah prayer, then he would sit in what is known as a tawarruk with a kaf, not a qaf. Tawarruk. And the tawarruk position here is that a person would tuck his left foot underneath his right foot. And his right foot would then still be upright, and his left backside would be on the floor. Now the purpose of this is that it adds more stability for a person to sit at length, because remember, as we will see now also, that this is a position that a person should be increasing in dua. The Prophet ﷺ used to seek refuge in 4 things, from the fitna Masih Dajjal, and from the trials and tribulations of life and death, and the punishment of the grave, and the punishment of the fire. And the Prophet ﷺ told Ibn Mas'ud, ثُمَّ لِيَتَخَيَّرْ مِنَ الدُّعَى مَا شَاءَ. This is a time where the person can make dua for whatever he wants. Allah is answering your dua. So now, the Prophet ﷺ used to sit in that position so that a person can extend in the dua. Because if he's sitting on his left foot, perhaps he'll get a dead leg or something. But sitting on your left buttock would allow you to stay at length. But now, if the person doesn't have khushu' and he hasn't got stability, we will say try, practice, get used to it until you get to a state where you can do it, and then try increasing that. But if a person doesn't have khushu', this is one of the sunnah aspects of the prayer, and this is actually disturbing him, etc., then he can sit in the tawarruk position. The Shaykh also mentions here now with that hadith where the Prophet ﷺ told us to increase in making dua at the time after making the durood, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, until he's finished that, before the taslim, increase in dua. Because Allah Jalla wa Ala is going to answer your dua. So it doesn't make sense that a person says, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, then starts making dua. And he's just been negligent of a point where Allah has guaranteed that He will answer his dua. The Shaykh is saying here that you will not find a person, any ulama, saying that a person should be making dua in congregation after the salat. And we talked about in Hisnul Muslim that it is recommended for a person to make dua himself, as long as it is not habitual, and there is no harm in that after nafil prayer or even the obligatory prayers. But that is on the condition that the person is not negligent once he has a chance before the taslim. Then the author ends the book. وَأَهَمْ شَيْءٍ بِالنِّسْبَةِ لِلصَّلَاةِ. What is the most important thing when it comes to the salah? How did he begin the book? بعد أن يجري الإنسان أفعاله على سنة فيهما أراء. That the Shaykh is saying here that this is what the person should do from the sunnah about the prayer. This is the description of the Prophet's prayer according to the sunnah from what I see. Because the Shaykh is saying here فيما أراء, from what I think and from my perspective. These are my opinions. But a person should also have حضور القلب, concentration. لأن كثير من الناس الآن, most of the people today do not concentrate in their prayer. Their thoughts are somewhere else. And وَبِمُجَرِّدْ مَا يَنْتَهِي مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ, as soon as he's finished the prayer, he has not gained any kind of purification, any kind of benefit, any kind of closeness. He's not asked Allah for one thing. Then what's the point in the prayer? Then a person will look at Islam and think, what's the point? He's gone into prayer, he's come out and he's doing major sins again. He's gone into prayer, he's not come out and he's still swearing and smoking cigarettes. He's not asked for any hidayah really. So we ask Allah to give us hidayah and give us the ability to perfect our salawat and give us concentration and give us ikhlas in all of our actions, and that Allah accepts us for our good deeds and He makes us of those who are firm in their salawat and our progeny and those who come after us from the generations of the Muslims, and that the salah becomes something which is our symbol and remains our symbol until Allah decrees. هذا والله أعلم وصلى اللهم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Do we have some questions? Do you have a question? Yes.
This about the feet.
About the feet.
Sujood and understanding.
Excellent. That's one of the things that I want to talk about. Where do you put your feet? Now, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli." Pray as you have seen me pray. Allah says in the Quran, فَوَلِّ وَجْهَكَ شَطْرَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ. And the ulama have said, there is complete agreement, that when a person is praying, he has to face the Qibla. Ibn Umar, Ibn Abbas and others from the companions said that whenever the Prophet ﷺ prayed, his whole body was facing the Qibla. It wasn't be that his torso slightly left and the body's, his feet, his shoulders, his face, everything is facing the Qibla. So this is a very important point. It's also been narrated by others from the companions that the Prophet ﷺ used to stand in a normal posture. How you would normally stand, not far apart, not too close. How would you normally stand? That's how you would stand. If the Prophet ﷺ said, "Pray as you have seen me pray," is there a difference whilst you're in congregation or not? Now with the majority of the ulama have said, no, the Prophet ﷺ prayed with his feet close to each other, in a normal posture. That's how we should pray. That's the opinion of the majority. But the Shafi'is have said, no, you have to do foot to foot. Why? The hadith of Nu'man in Bukhari. The hadith of Anas bin Malik. All of them said that kunna, we used to put our foot next to the foot of our companion when we used to pray. Again, legitimate khilaf, because this is from Bukhari. It's got a lot of strength to it. But the majority have answered by saying what that means is that we used to get close to each other. Because there's another narration in Nasai Abu Dawood that we used to attach the neck to the neck of our neighbor. We used to attach the shoulder, the knee, and the ankle to that of our neighbor. What does that mean, neck? What does that mean, shoulder? So now the majority of them have said what it means, that they were close and they were straight. And for me, that's the correct opinion. That's the opinion of the author also. And like we've said here, a person has to pray in the way that the Prophet ﷺ stood and how he prayed. And he didn't make his feet long. And there is no, for me, this is the opinion of the majority, there's no evidence to say that a person would stand in one way when he's praying in congregation and in another way when he is praying. But this is, again, for you to research and see what you think is the correct opinion. And Allah knows best. Any questions? Is that a question? Yes. 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 When a person is praying alone, the question is, what about the Surah Al-Fatiha? When does a person have to pray Surah Al-Fatiha in every single rak'ah? The ulama have mentioned, this is the opinion of the majority. If you're praying alone, you have to do the Fatiha. If you don't do the Fatiha, when you're praying alone, the salah is invalid. There is no difference between that. When a person is praying in a congregational prayer, in a silent congregational prayer, Anas bin Malik said that we used to recite, and we saw the Prophet's beard moving, and we used to recite also. And this is the opinion of the majority. The Hanafis say in silent or in loud prayers, you don't say anything. But the correct opinion is that when it comes to the silent prayers, you have to. What about the loud prayers, Maghrib and Isha? The majority have said now, so now it's the opposite of the silent. The majority have said now you should be quiet. إِذَا قُرِئَ الْقُرْآنِ فَانْصِتُوا وَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. Be quiet, listen to it, so that you can have mercy shown upon you. When the Qur'an is being recited, you should not be doing anything else. This is the opinion of the majority. You should be doing your own Fatiha. The Imam's Fatiha is sufficient for you. You're saying Ameen. But the Prophet ﷺ said, and this is the opinion of the Shafi'is, La salat liman lam yaqra' bi Fatihatil kitab. There is no salat if a person doesn't do the Fatiha. What does that mean? There is no salat. Whether I'm praying alone or I'm praying behind the Imam, there is no salat. That's what the Prophet ﷺ said. So we have to take that in its apparency. As for the other ayah in the Qur'an, if you look at why it was revealed, it basically means that when the Prophet ﷺ was reciting Qur'an to the Quraysh, what they used to do is they used to cover their ears, or they used to drown out the recitation of the Prophet ﷺ. So Allah is saying here to the companions, if the Qur'an is being recited, give Muhammad ﷺ your attention. Give the speech of Allah your attention. And this is a very important principle. You have one hadith, you have another hadith. You have a hadith and an ayah, like here. What do you do if this is saying one thing and this thing is saying another thing? The principle in the Sharia is that you will follow whatever is closest to the thing that you are doing. So based on that principle, what is closer? Be quiet when the Quran is being recited, or that there is no salah if you don't do Fatiha. According to the Shafi'is, this one is closer. So now I'm giving you an understanding that this is the khilaf. It's a very strong khilaf. The majority say, no, you have to be quiet. The Quran is being recited. It's in the Quran. But for me, the correct opinion is that the Fatiha must be said when you are alone. The Fatiha must be said in a quiet prayer. And the Fatiha must be said also by the person praying behind the Imam, even in the loud prayer. Wallahu a'lam. Yes?
With the silent prayers, like third rak'ah, fourth rak'ah,
Yes.
after Surah Fatiha, do you pray another surah?
Excellent. The author mentioned this, but we looked over that. The Shaykh said in the third rak'ah and the fourth rak'ah, if a person wants to add a surah or an ayah, then there is no harm in him doing so. But the Prophet ﷺ habitually used to just do the Fatiha. Shaykh Muhammad al-Uthaymin, may Allah have mercy on him, and may Allah continue and allow us to benefit from his work. He has about 3 or 4 different books which talk about the salah, different ahkam and different things revolving the salah. Today we've taken the most important of them, which is a description of the prayer. Another book that we're going to cover, inshallah, is the Sujood al-Sahw. He has an actual book talking about what you should do if you have forgotten something in the salat. And that's going to be our next topic, inshallah. Next week, there is no lesson on a Saturday. You have somebody else coming on Sunday, the 12th of January, to deliver a lecture. Our next lesson will be on the 19th, which is a Sunday, the 18th. I won't be able to make it. On the 19th, we will be doing Sujood al-Sahw. And after that, we will see, and we'll make an announcement talking about the next book that we will cover. But the third book that we will cover is about the prayer times. The Shaykh has written a book about the prayer times. And this is very important because he talks about the contemporary issue that we have here in this country every summer. And we will talk about it in the summer when it comes to Isha and Fajr. Ask Allah to give us benefit and Iman and Yaqeen and Taqwa. Yes, uncle.
In the third rak'ah.
Yes.
Stand up for the third rak'ah.
Yes.
We do Rafa Yadayn.
Yes.
This is mandatory.
Okay, so raising the hand in any part of the prayer, the 4 parts, we raise our hands in 4 parts. The question is raising the hands mandatory? You raise your hands in the beginning. Takbiratul Ihram, Allahu Akbar, when you start in the Salah. You raise your hands before the ruku'. You raise your hands after the ruku'. And you remember, we're doing this simultaneously whilst you do it. And the 4th time is whilst you are getting up after the first tashahhud. Shaykh al-Albani in his Sifr Salah says that you do it whilst you are sitting down. Remember the narration of Ibn Umar, the Prophet ﷺ never raised his hands whilst in the sujood or anywhere near the sujood position. So the correct opinion is that the person raises his hands whilst he's getting up from the first tashahhud, say Allahu Akbar. None of that is mandatory. So if a person misses it out, there is no harm, inshaAllah. Yes, uncle. Wa alaikum salam.
What's the dalil of those who keep away from each other in Salah, leave a gap between themselves?
What's the dalil? What's the dalil for those people who leave a gap between the salah? Leaving a gap is not allowed. The Prophet ﷺ said, فَأَتِمُّ الصَّفْرَ الْأَوَّلَ فِي الْأَوَّلِ أَتِمُّ الصُّفُوخُمْ. And he used to say many things before. He used to stow, all of those things, which basically means pack up, make the line straight, etc. The majority of the ulama, now the khilaf here is it wajib or is it not wajib? Is it wajib for me to have no gap, or is it not wajib? The majority of the ulama have said that it is not wajib, it's mustahab. Bidalil, evidence is the hadith of Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr, he came into the masjid, and the Prophet ﷺ was in ruku'. And he said, if I make it to the front of the masjid, I'm not going to meet the ruku'. I'm going to miss this rak'ah. So you know what he did? He started the prayer and he went into ruku'. And then he walked the rest of the way. The saf was already completed, or perhaps there was room for him. And this is the way the majority understand it, that he created his own saf behind without filling the gap. Prophet ﷺ didn't say that your salah is invalid. He said, don't do it again. But your salah is not invalidated. This is the opinion of the majority. And there's different dalil that they bring also. So the majority have said, the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ used to pray with women in the back, they said that they didn't complete their rows sometimes. So there's different evidences. So the majority have said that it is mustahab. This is not the correct opinion. The correct opinion is that the Prophet ﷺ, whenever he gives an amr, you have to fulfill it. وَمَا كَانَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَلَا مُؤْمِنَةً إِذَا قَضَى اللَّهُ أَمْرًا وَرَسُولًا. If Allah is not befitting for a believer or a woman, believing woman, if Allah and His Messenger have said something and commanded something, that he has his own opinion after that. The ulama have said whenever there is a command in the Quran and the Sunnah, it means wajib. So the Prophet ﷺ told us to do it, therefore it is wajib. But now the khilaf now. So now if you go to a masjid and there is a gap, you have a person on the side in a kursi, in a chair, and there's 4 or 5 spaces. Why? It's because their understanding is that it's okay. It's mustahab to make the saf fill in the gaps. That's one issue. But the other issue is, what is a gap? Because the majority, again, have said that it is permissible for a person to be not having his foot next to his foot, and there could be even a little gap between the shoulder and shoulder. And when I went to Saudi Arabia myself, I prayed alongside many of the major kibar ulama, and I found them not doing foot to foot and shoulder to shoulder. I was very shocked when I first got there. I was like, Shaykh Salih Fawzan, he's praying with his foot, and somebody's trying to put his foot next to the Shaykh's not putting his foot. Shaykh Salih Fawzan, there's a gap, and the shoulder is not touching his shoulder. How is that? Shaykh Salih Hidana, Shaykh, there's a huge gap once, like that. What is the gap? So now there's a hadith in Abu Dawood that has been mentioned. The companions used to get close enough to each other, and it was enough space for a small sheep to go past. This is between their feet, not between their shoulders. Because then if you make it between their shoulders, there's going to be a huge gap. Between the shoulder of the person praying next to him, a small sheep used to go past. You find this Abu Dawood. Therefore, when you have that as a benchmark, then you can understand that being close to another person, his shoulder, you will work out for yourself. And a person can then see himself that, this is a big gap, it's a small gap. بتمام هذا الحديث, the Shaykh is asking here, what about the hadith that don't leave gaps for the shaitan to penetrate? There's another hadith in Abu Dawood which completes the hadith that the companions used to have a small gap enough for the sheep to get through. في رواية. لكن هذا بالنسبة للخلاف, we're just talking about the khilaf between the ulama. Again, if a person is not happy with my opinion personal, or what al-Uthaymin rahimahullah, or any other madhabs will say, he has to investigate for himself, and but he has to also remember there's khilaf and there's ijtihad. And one of the things that the Shaykh wrote about, which we will inshallah cover, we said the Shaykh has authored so many books, it will suffice us for maybe even a lifetime. He's got a book which talks about how to understand the khilaf, and he goes into it detail. We've just touched upon some of the things in today's lesson, and inshallah in the future we'll talk about that in a separate occasion, inshallah. Yes.
You know how some people, they say that the Quran takes precedence?
Yes.
Can the Sunnah oppose the Quran?
Can the Sunnah oppose the Quran? Okay, so now you will find another principle from the Hanafi and the Maliki madhab is that if you have an ayah and you have the hadith, ansitu, Allah says, be quiet when the Quran is being recited. But then the hadith says, La salah, there is no salah if a person doesn't do Fatiha. What do you give precedence to? From their madhab, another way that they've derived why a person shouldn't recite anything in the loud and the quiet prayers is you give precedence to the Quran. The question is asking here now, is it possible for an evidence from the Quran to oppose an evidence from the Sunnah? Oppose, again, is a very strict word and a very harsh word. We shouldn't be using that word. The ulama views, is it possible for an ayah to specify a hadith or restrict a hadith? Or is it possible for a hadith to restrict an ayah or specify an ayah? And the short answer to that, without going into it, is yes. So it could be that a hadith takes precedence over an ayah because of a specific, what was the word they use? Oppose, not oppose. There is no opposition. So bi'idhnillah, next week there is no lesson, but you will have a person coming on the 12th to deliver a lecture on Sunday. And our next appointment will be on the 19th, which is a Sunday, which we will be looking at the sujood, as-sahw, from the same author again, Ustadh Ariff Olla, Allah mercy on him and illuminate his grave. هذا والله أعلم. صلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.